Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talk Nerdy. Today is Monday, March 26th, and I'm your host, Cara Santa Maria. It's actually probably earlier than that. I just realized in saying that I'm time traveling a bit because I am leaving for the Amazon. As I record this, it's earlier in the week, and I'm leaving for the Amazon rainforest, the Peruvian side, on Saturday, March 24th. So I'm actually probably going to air this a little bit early. So if you're listening to this on Monday, March 26th, it's Monday, March 26th. And that's the day my episodes always drop. So that's the day I always read. But it may be a few days earlier, and you can just feel special like a time traveler. It's my 200th freaking episode. You guys, I can't believe it. It's all because of you two. It really is. You guys are the reason that Talk Nerdy has been on the air for 4 freaking years and that I've done 200 different episodes. I can't wait to celebrate with you. I want to thank those of you who make Talk Nerdy possible. The best way that you can support the show is by visiting my website where you can find the click-through links or just going straight to www.patreon.com/talknerdy. Patreon is a really, really cool community where you can pledge your support to a bunch of different independent creators in any amount from like 50 cents all the way up to like, I don't know, $5,000. I'm going to say a high number because that's never going to happen. But you can support shows, especially different artists and people who make things that, like myself, make sure that they're free to download for anybody who's interested in. Your support is helping other people who can't afford to support the show be able to enjoy it at no cost. Big supporters this week include Phil T. Bear, David J. E. Smith, Pedro M. Rosario Barbosa, Jeffrey Perez, Charles Payette, Jonathan Wright, Christian Jeffrey, The Honorable Husband, Jafe, Gabriel Felipe Jaramillo Gonzalez, Brian Holden, and Jeffrey Sewell. And of course, there's so many more of you who keep the show going. I can't thank you all because that would be the whole show. And as much as it would be fun to hear your name, it would be kind of boring for everybody else. But yeah, you're all really, really important to me. And honestly, I don't think I really understood what kind of an impact Talk Nerdy would make on my life when I first started it. And I definitely don't think I calculated how important just doing this every week and interacting with you guys would be for me. I'm so appreciative of all of your feedback on social media and through the Patreon portal. I'm so appreciative of how much you guys participated in this Ask Me Anything session. So for a couple weeks now, I've been letting you know that this is how I wanted to celebrate my 200th episode, that you could send me in questions via social media and via special email address that we set up. And I'm so glad so many people chose to participate. So many, in fact, that we couldn't get to all of the questions. But I hope that we did a pretty good sampling. And I'm very excited to report that instead of talking to myself in the episode, I asked for my good friend and previous podcast guest and also host of the Ologies podcast, Alie Ward, to come in and sort of be the moderator to go through all of these AMA questions and pick out the ones that she was really interested in and chat with me for the hour. So without any further ado, here is Alie Ward and my very special 200th episode, Ask Me Anything. Well, oh my gosh, this is so weird. It is my 200th episode. 100th, it's a hard word to say. And instead of interviewing myself, which is what I did at my 100th episode, which is weird, I have asked previous guest and awesome friend, Alie Ward, to come and turn the tables.
Hey,
girl.
I'm just so excited.
It's so weird.
I'm nervous for you. Why am I nervous for you?
Because you're about to ask me a bunch of personal questions.
I know, and I don't know what's in here. We're about to crack open a real Pandora's box of inquiry.
I know. So we have sourced Ask Me Anything questions on Twitter, Facebook, and also with an email address. And so we just have all these user? That's weird.
Listener.
I like that better. User questions.
I don't think your listeners use you.
I feel so used. And so I'm really nervous to see what people have asked.
I know. Is there anything too personal that someone could ask you?
I feel like I don't love to talk about like relationships on air. I don't know. I kind of feel like there are certain things. It's not that there's anything too personal because I'm so good at being like, let me tell you about my deepest, darkest depression. But at the same time, when somebody's like, tell me about your boyfriend, I'm like, like, you don't need to know that. What is that? I feel like there is a line in the sand where it's like, don't come in my bedroom with me.
I get it. But the thing is, you would probably talk about past relationships, but maybe not current ones?
Probably. Or maybe certain aspects of past. I don't know. I feel like we have to see. We just have to run up to I don't know until the moment strikes me.
I'm the same way. I keep my relationships on the DL, on the social meds, mostly because I feel like as soon as I come out with a relationship, it'll all turn to hell.
Yeah,
and
it'll just catch on fire.
Yeah, and so I'm just like, let's not talk about this until like we're 70.
Yeah.
And it's for real.
I also feel like I want to take these off too, because you're not wearing yours, and I don't want. This is so weird to not wear headphones while I'm recording. This feels super weird. You guys.
Got a naked head over there.
Yes. Oh my gosh, it feels so naked. I also kind of feel like it's like less for me because I live a public life to some extent, because I'm like on TV and I do the podcast and I talk about, my secrets. But for the person I'm seeing, like, I don't want to make them be in the public eye because I'm not with somebody who's in the public eye.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, like being like, let me Instagram you all the time is weird.
Yeah, that's not your brand.
No, it's very off-brand.
So we're going to see what people ask you.
Okay.
So we have so many questions. Your listeners, number one, are awesome.
Yay.
You have great listeners who care a lot. You have a lot of questions. Do you want to just go through as many as we can?
Yeah. And like, let's just see, some of them might require more discussion and some of them might be like, yes.
Cool.
Moving on.
Let's get into it.
Okay.
You ready for this?
I think so.
Oh, here we go.
Lordy.
The first question I opened was just asking you to define a word. So I'm going to skip that one.
I'm like, I don't know.
Xenon Budsky wants to know.
Xenon Budsky?
I think I said that right.
That's
I'm
an
not
amazing
sure.
name.
It's an amazing name. If this person isn't an astronaut, I'm going to be a little disappointed.
At least an astronaut in his dreams.
Or
if it's a he.
Or
Xenon
she.
could be female, for sure.
Perhaps they're from the future.
Okay, we're going to go with that.
So they already know the answer to this, but whatever. Wants to know, do you have any personal heroes other than Alie Ward? That's not true. I added that. Do you have any personal heroes or people you admire or look up to?
So many. I mean, that's like a really hard one to answer because I'm not one of those people who has like idolized somebody over my life. Sometimes you hear these really cool stories from people that are like, when I was young, I got a chance to meet Mae Jemison and my whole life I was like, had her poster on my wall and eventually I became an astronaut and it was all because of Mae Jemison. Like I've never had that kind of experience, but I've had some incredible professors, some incredible female professors who I think were who guided me, who helped me through some struggles and identity issues and when I was trying to figure out what it is I wanted to do, who I wanted to be. So definitely Sharon Jenkins was a really big influence on me, and so was Carolyn Pitta. But you guys don't know who these people are.
Who are they?
Sharon Jenkins was my undergraduate advisor at the University of North Texas. And she actually asked me to write a book chapter for a book that she wrote when I was an undergrad.
Whoa.
I wasn't old enough to get into a bar, but I was a published author, which is pretty cool. And then Carolyn Pitta was my advisor for the year that I worked on my PhD 10 years ago in New York, and then I dropped out. And that was really cool because I really talked to her a lot about whether or not I wanted to stay, what was right for me. And she wasn't one of these like, at all costs, never drop out, screw life, school is more important. She was like, yeah, let's like weigh these different options. So I appreciated that about her. And of course, I know my mom's, I think she's influential for me. She's always been like supportive of my kind of punk rock, anti-establishment, fuck you attitude. So I like that because...
Can you swear around your mom?
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
Do you not swear around your parents?
No, I don't. And we all swear, but we all pretend like we don't. It's very weird.
So funny.
Do you have any personal hero whose career that you have looked up to?
Well, here's a hard thing, right? Being a woman in SciComm, like there aren't that many. I look up to my friends because I think that, I look up to you. I look up to, like Emily Calandrelli for a long time was, at least from what I could figure, was the only woman I know that hosts her own science show on television. Now, Jana Levin, who I've had on the show, she has a Nova, she was the first female host on a PBS show. But like up until then, Emily, and it's a kids show, not that like is denigrating at all. Like kids shows are amazing, but there just are no women who are doing mainstream science television in America. It's a huge bummer. There are so many really interesting women out there. Like Carolyn Porco, I think she's really inspirational. And Alice Roberts in the UK, who does a lot of BBC stuff, is really inspirational too. But here in America, it's hard. Like modeling your career after somebody who's kind of doing what you do. Everybody's trying to make it at the same time. And there is no female Carl Sagan and there is no female Neil deGrasse Tyson or Bill Nye. Like, we're all not trying to be the female version of that, which is a bullshit way to put it.
Right.
But all of those people who have done SciComm and been really successful in it and had global reach and global appeal have all been men. Right?
Yeah, you're right.
Kind of a bummer.
So you're blazing some trails.
I mean, you are too. We all are. Like, I think that we're working and we're really supportive, which I think is great. So in a way, kind of my heroes are also the people who are helping push me in the times when I feel really down. So that's cool that when your heroes get to be not, I just popped my knuckles on air.
Ooh.
Did you hear that? When your heroes get to be real people and not sort of beyond reproach, like heroes are like people in your everyday life. I think that's cool too, because I don't know, you can learn from like actual mistakes.
It's also nice when you can text your heroes.
I know.
That doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
You're like, hey, does any of my heroes want to get a hot pot tonight? And you're like, oh, that's nice.
Yeah. Hey, heroes, I'm feeling really down on myself. I need noodles in broth.
When this comes out, you should tweet at all those people who you just mentioned.
You're right.
And say, hey,
You're my hero.
you.
Yeah. Especially because I don't think Carolyn Porker or Alice Roberts know I exist.
Oh.
So maybe if I bug them enough, they'll realize that I'm a person.
Please do that. Brett Hutchings wants to know, what's been the one scientific breakthrough or discovery in the past 5 years that have surprised you the most? And he's in Japan, by the way.
Oh, neat. Very high tech in Japan. Scientific breakthrough or discovery that has surprised me the most. That's hard. So much cool stuff has happened in the past 5. I think CRISPR. I think that because before 5 years ago, I mean, the things that CRISPR is doing have always been somewhat possible or feasible, or at least like theoretically possible or feasible. But to be able to see grad students, to be able to see people doing really interesting genetic work that didn't have access to the technology before because it was too expensive, or doing it in fields. Like, you know, our friend Aaron Pomerantz, I'm about to see him in the Amazon rainforest, and he does like this portable DNA sequencing.
I know.
On the spot, and can be like, oh yeah, just discovered a new species.
Yeah. Oh,
like, you know, it's amazing.
Yeah, I know. It's like, it'll be an app next.
I know. Like, just on your iPhone, you'll be like, let me just take a little DNA sample of this like slime mold.
Yeah.
And see if I discovered something new.
I just edited some stuff out of my genome. Not a big deal.
It's so crazy. And yeah, obviously there are like big ethical concerns around it, but I do think it's really neat how democratized a lot of these technologies are becoming. And that's probably one of the biggest ones. I talk about it a lot on Skeptic's Guide, less so on Talk Nerdy, but that's probably one of the biggest ones that I've been like, whoa.
Brendan Flood wants to know, these are two good questions. I'm going to lob them both at you.
Okay.
When you get asked on jobs to hide your tattoos and piercings, how do you react? And is it still common for you to be asked that, with them becoming more common? Or, you know, have those requests been introduced? Brendan Flood would also, this is a statement, I feel as though you don't share enough information about Killer. What breed is he? What is his personality like? Please brag about your dog.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's good
I'm
questions.
so glad you asked. Okay, so we'll start with, oh, it's so funny. Killer is looking at me right now, begging to jump in my lap. Come on, Killer.
He hears his name.
Ooh, there he is.
He's like, do you need to get another guest on this?
I can't make him speak on command, unfortunately, but let me see if he's making any noises that you can hear. Those are the sounds of him licking my finger. I don't know. All right, Killer. So Killer's going to be in my lap while I answer this question. Actually, let's start with Killer because that's just
Let's start with him.
fun. So Killer is surprising genetically because he looks like, I think, predominantly a Dachshund Chihuahua with maybe a little bit of like Cocker, or like what's the dog that has like the floofy ears like this?
Papillon?
Yeah, Papillon. But he's none of those things. I got a genetic test, and he is predominantly, we don't know. That's a great thing. The biggest percentage of his genes is mixed beyond 3 generations, and they can't pinpoint what they are. But they did talk about the different large sort of categories of dog that he could be, and Dachshund is not in any of them, which is so weird.
Just say he's a purebred, we don't know.
He's a purebred, we don't know. The next biggest chunk of his DNA is Chihuahua, which is not surprising. But then he is equal parts Poodle
Oh, stop.
and Lhasa Apso. And I'm like, I did not sign up for that. No offense.
Poodles are so smart,
They
though.
are really smart. But here's the thing. He doesn't look like any of those things. And actually the vet from the genetic test, I think it's called Wisdom Panel. I recommend it. They're really good. The vet wrote me a letter that was like, I know that he doesn't look a lot like what his genes are. And we looked and we found that there's a large amount of homozygosity in his DNA profile, which means that it's quite likely that his parents were related. So even though he's not a purebred, he's a total mutt, it's likely that he was a backyard birth from either brothers or sisters or mother and son. So he's single generation inbred.
He is an angel of scandal.
He is, yes. And that's why he's got all these weird recessive traits and looks like an amazing puppers. He actually looks like a tiny, what's it called? Nova Scotia toller.
I don't know what you were talking about.
I'm about to Google it for you so you can see.
I love that you said that as though I would know what a Nova Scotia
I didn't
toller
know what it was either until somebody was like, Killer looks just
casually
like
a Nova Scotia toller. I have no idea.
You're going to be like, what the?
Yeah, look this up. It's exactly what he looks
Killer,
like.
Except Nova Scotia tollers are bigger dog, like way bigger dogs.
No, he looks like someone put a Honey, I Shrunk the Nova Scotia troller. How do you spell troller?
Toller.
Toller?
Yeah, duck toller. Toller. How much does that look like a big killer?
Yeah, no, if anyone needs to know what Cara's dog looks like, Google this dog. Same dog.
Same dog, except imagine if it was hit with a shrink ray. Because it didn't look like, as puppies, they don't look the same because that's like a big dog puppy. Mm-hmm. Whereas Killer looked the exact same as a puppy, he just got longer. He just grew like an accordion.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, look, there he is duck tolling. So yeah, that's Killer. He's amazing. He's my best friend. He's turning 8 in May. I'm so sad. But he has all these puppy-like traits. He's still very, very soft like a puppy. He acts like a puppy, and I love him to death.
What about your piercings?
Piercings and tattoos. This is an interesting one. First of all, the only real piercing anybody asked me to take out is the one in my lip, because the only other piercings I have are in my ears. I used to have a lot, like eyebrows and navel and stuff like that, but I'm old now, so I took them all out a long time ago. I do struggle with the idea of, like, how long can you have your lip pierced before you are, like, old biker chick? Like, at what point does it cross?
You are not an old biker chick.
So I do think it might be time to take it out soon. Almost every show I do asks me to take it out, actually. It's more and more the older I get. Also, I think, too, because I'm doing more sophisticated shows. So, like, when I work on Nat Geo, they don't want me to wear it. The local show I used to work on, SoCal Connected, on KCET, which is public television, they would ask me to take it out. I can't remember if Bill Nye asked me to take it out. Watch when the show episodes come out later this year. You'll see. I don't remember. Tattoos, interestingly, though, almost nobody cares about. Almost everybody's okay with them showing. I do think there's some sexism still in this, because I've definitely been on shows where I'm asked to take my lip piercing out, yet there's a male co-host who has, like, neck tattoos. And you're like, really? So that's a little bit frustrating. I don't know. I used to get annoyed. It's like, this is part of who I am. But then I realized, no, it's not. Like, I wasn't born with a lip ring. I chose to do that.
Yeah, that was elective.
And I get it, because a lot of the shows that I do are science shows, and they have a predominantly built-in older male audience. And in a way, like, fuck them. I don't want to, like, kowtow to them. But at the same time, if I do a YouTube video, I see this all the time. Like, half the comments are about the fish hook in my lip. And I'm like, really, you guys? Like, we can't get over that already?
It is a good identifier where you're like, oh, yes, I know her. She's the cute chick with the lip ring.
And the glasses. You know what's interesting is people who have face blindness, prosopagnosia, tend to be able to recognize me readily because I do have these, like, really recognizable features.
Well, now I'm going to go get a face tattoo.
Exactly. Then they'll always be like, oh, it's Alie Ward.
Yeah. Oh, I've met you before.
Yeah.
Did I meet you at a barbecue? Yes, I did. Yes, I did. You have a dragonfly tattooed on your face.
Chick with a dragonfly. Oh, I like that you would go feminine, though.
I don't know. Dragonflies, when I think of dragonflies, I just think about how in their naiad stage, they're just these insane carnivores that are ruthless. So I kind of am like,
it's like, yeah, props. It's like androgynous, I guess. But at least you're not getting, like, I don't know, a skull and flames, like a devil tattooed on your forehead.
No one would ever forget me. I will say that I was familiar with your work before we became friends, and I was surprised at how friendly you were.
Aww. Do I come across hardened? Am I a hardened criminal?
I was like, from the look of her, she takes no shit. And then you're the warmest, kindest person. And I was like, oh, interesting.
But I do kind of take no shit.
Yeah, you also take no shit.
It's sort of still a good personality.
Yeah, you call it like you see it.
That's true.
Jose Daniel Gomez de Segura
yes.
Would like to know about your professional plans after you get your PhD in clinical psychology. Do you want to apply for a research position, or will you be seeing patients?
Oh, that's a good question. You know, I don't know. I don't think I'll be doing research anymore. I feel like I put in my time there. I don't know if I will be diving into clinical work immediately, because a lot of getting the PhD is multifaceted. It's partially because it's sort of a goal I've always had for myself and now feels like a good time. I can afford it both monetarily and temporally. That's a weird way to put it. But yeah, I can afford the time and the money because I'm working so much, but my job is quite flexible. So that's helpful. Also, I do think that part of what appeals to me about clinical psychology is the freelance component of it. And because I just kind of enjoy being a freelancer, I enjoy the lifestyle of making my own hours and being my own boss, and I could never go back to corporate, whatever. So I'm actually quite nervous about doing the practicum component or the internship component of my degree, because you have to like go to a hospital or go to a clinic and like answer to somebody and be there at 9 a.m. And I'm like, oh, how am I going to do that? I'm definitely interested in working with people who are dying. That's the area that I am hoping to specialize in, death and dying psychotherapy. Two sides of that. I'm partially interested in the clinical component, which would be like offering therapy to people who are in this very important stage of their life. I'm also interested in the consulting side of it because assisted suicide is now legal or will soon be legal in California. And I think competency to engage in euthanasia is going to be a really important aspect. You know, is this person of sound mind to be able to make that decision? And as a clinical psychologist, you learn to do, or you're licensed and competent to do assessments to be able to figure out if somebody is cognitively capable of that. So I think that those will probably be the areas of practice that I do, but I think I'll still write. I think I'll still podcast. I may even still do some TV and hopefully kind of figure it out, blend it all together and figure out my way to approach it. But yeah, I think seeing patients will be much more interesting to me than doing research.
Do you think you'll ever retire?
God, no.
Okay.
It's so funny. My mom is retired and she's working full time. I don't know how she figured that out.
Wait, that's not retired.
I know. Like she retired from the school district in Texas last year, but she is always a fill-in substitute teacher. Like she can't not work.
But that's like saying I'm sleeping, but I'm also shoveling the driveway.
I know.
Those are incongruent.
Like she's legally retired in that she can only work a certain number of hours or she can only earn a certain amount of money up to like some percentage of her previous salary. But like she's not retired. She works all the time. And I'm like, all right, Mom, I'm with you.
This is a great segue into the next question from Paul Mark, who I selected this question because I need the answer. Paul says, I suffer from anxiety when I feel like I'm not being productive. So the idea of a mental health day is so alien to me. And he says, I recently listened to the podcast with the author of Hiding in Bathrooms, and you mentioned the same. So do you have any advice on how to get past or simply through this?
That's a hard one. Yeah. I take mental health days periodically. Do you, Alie? No, you never.
No.
I know.
I fell asleep on the couch last night eating hummus. In the middle of eating hummus, I just passed out. And then I woke up and I was like, gotta get that blog post up. I need to learn how to do this, which is why I put this question so far up to the top.
I think what I do is I schedule it.
Okay.
So that's part of it. Because I don't take mental health days and like just lose responsibility. You know, I don't like shit on all my responsibilities. I look at my calendar and I go, oh, and this is another thing. I think we have a problem sometimes as freelancers when we're scheduling our calendars out and we go, oh, there's a hole there. Okay, yeah, I can take that thing there.
Yes.
Oh, there's a hole there. I can take that thing. But what we should probably be doing is say, oh, there's enough holes stacked up on that Friday that I won't put anything into that Friday and I'll keep that Friday clear. So that's more what I like. If I have a day that's like 6 hours full and then somebody's asking, well, can we do it that 6 hour full Tuesday or that Friday where you have nothing scheduled? Oh, I'll just add it to the 6 hour full Tuesday up until I get to an 8 or 10 hour day. And I'll keep Friday empty because then I can use that as a mental health day. And when I say mental health day, I mean like I ain't working out. I ain't like doing homework. I'm not, and that's really hard for me because I still usually like write to-do lists and do. But honestly, a mental health day for me is lots of times like I'm not putting on pants today.
Oh yeah, no pants can GTFO, man.
Exactly. It's like Postmates and Netflix and honestly sleeping a lot. That's really important for me. But that's also sort of an avoidance mechanism of mine that I'm working on with my shrink right now.
Well, you have to rest at some point.
I know, but I love sleep. Sleep is so good.
So why at what point does sleep become an avoidance mechanism?
When you do it for 14 hours.
Well, okay. I'm going to maybe say there's some merit to that caution.
Yeah, we'll go with that.
So you do take mental health days, but that's great. You just will keep that day open instead of popping something into an empty day.
Yeah, I try not to get to the point where I'm so overwhelmed that I have to take a mental health day as a reactionary measure, like that I'm in shutdown mode.
Yeah.
Because then I feel like I don't really even get to not enjoy it, but benefit from it, because it should be really restorative. I might go to yoga on a mental health day. I might go on a hike. But also, if those things feel like obligations, I only do them if they actually feel like something I want to do. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, that sounds nice. But if I'm like, ugh, the idea of going to, then I'm not getting out of it what I need to get out of it. So I'll cancel. I won't do it.
Good.
Yeah.
No errands.
No, exactly. No. I'll only do the things that I want for me. Like I might go buy myself something nice.
Sure.
If that sounds like fun. But if it sounds like work, then I'm not putting on pants.
Smack on a sheet mask if you want.
Yeah, I love sheet masks.
I know you do.
I think that's the least skeptical thing I do, which I'm sure somebody will have asked that question. Like, what do you do that's not skeptical? I love sheet masks. I don't think they do anything. Like, honestly, like, I don't think that they actually contribute to
Here's what I think.
Poor health.
I think that they are like a very moist blanket you would put over a parakeet cage that just says, good night.
Yeah, I think
for the time being.
And then you're like, and also it's one of those things where it's so hideous when you wear a sheet mask that like
they're horrifying.
You're absolutely doing this for you because you look like a legit serial killer.
They look like something between Texas Chainsaw Massacre's Leatherface and like Michael Myers, like Friday. It's somewhere in between them.
It's so scary.
Yeah,
like, no one looks hot in a sheet mask, and if you do, fuck you.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
There's something wrong with you. You're doing it wrong.
Don't try to selfie anything attractive in one of those.
No.
Annika Merkelbach asks, is there anything you would tell young skeptics, young science communicators, or podcast beginners?
I think the best advice that I usually try to give for somebody who's starting in SciComm at least is stop. This is the advice I gave to you too when you're starting your podcast, Alie.
No.
Don't wait until you think it's going to be perfect. Just do it because you're going to fuck up and people aren't going to be listening at the beginning and you're going to do things wrong. But that's going to happen regardless of how much your anxiety gets in the way of you just diving in.
Yeah.
So the truth is, like, if you feel ready, not even if you feel ready, if you feel like you have an idea that you want to share, even if you don't have all the right tools to do it exactly the way you want to, or you're nervous that you're kind of going about it the wrong way and, oh, I just need another year until I feel more confident. No, just do it. Because at the beginning, nobody's going to be listening. You'll build your audience organically with you. You'll ask them for advice. You'll ask them for feedback. Like, listen to some early episodes of Talk Nerdy. You know what I mean? Like I should not have told you to do that. But there's growth. Or not. That might be even worse. It's like the exact same. I make all the same mistakes. But yeah, just do it. That's the best way. I've been learning that too through my psychology training, is that reading about therapy in a book is a very different than doing therapy with a client. Like, there's only so much you can be mentally prepared before you just have to learn from experience. So just do it and you'll learn a lot along the way.
That's very true. I sat on my podcast for 8 or 9 months. I could have grown a human being in the time it took me to put out my podcast. And I learned more in the first 3 weeks of doing my podcast than I learned in all of that time just pacing. Yeah. So yeah.
Just pacing. Exactly.
Do the thing. Do the thing.
Yeah. And I guess you did ask about young skeptics too. Same kind of a thing. Skepticism is a daily grind. You don't just become a skeptic overnight and you don't say like, oh, I know all of the ways to be skeptical and now I'm good at it and I never have to try again. Even like Stephen Novella will tell you that it's an active process every day, questioning yourself, stopping yourself, checking yourself, thinking about the decisions and why you're making the decisions that you make. So just start. It's never too early to just start.
Okay. That's good advice.
Yeah.
And also, it's your thinking that it's not good is actually going to be so much better than you think it is.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
I so know what you mean. I have friends, you know these friends, and we fall victim to this a lot too, who have these really biased views of either their work or their image or their whatever. And something I always have to remind myself of is that like the way I look in the mirror, whether it's a literal or a figurative mirror, is so distorted compared to how other people see me. It's legit a funhouse mirror. And so you have to remind yourself of that when you're looking in and you're like, I look like a clown.
Yeah.
And people are like, I don't see a clown. You're like, how can you not see that clown? It's right there staring back at you. They don't see it. They just see something different.
Yeah. So what you're making is probably better than you think it is.
Absolutely.
Right. You're only seeing the imperfections.
Yeah.
R.D. Tingstrom I think this is a...
I love these listeners' names. It's
I
so
know.
good.
Asks, if we had the logistics and propulsion capability to go to Alpha Centauri and back, would you go?
No.
Okay.
Hands down, I won't go to the moon.
Oh, yeah?
I don't even know if I'll do a parabolic like space tourism flight. It scares the living piss out of me. I used to have a hard time looking through telescopes. Isn't that weird?
Really?
I have like this really intense phobia like of losing my sense of being grounded. So when I took astronomy in college, I used to have to keep one eye open when I would look through the telescope. Isn't that weird?
I wonder, because I talked to Katie Mack about this in the cosmology episode. I wonder if that's cosmic vertigo.
Could be. Yeah. Could be that I had. So can you imagine being an astronaut? Oh my God. So many things. I do not have the right stuff. I'll tell you that much. No, thank you.
There are so many people that want to do that. It's one of those things where I'm like, if y'all want to go to space, you have my spot.
That's how I feel.
You know what I mean?
Take my spot because I don't want to die. Like, that sounds horrible. Here's the thing. This is a good indicator of my answer to that question. As a general rule, I do not participate in activities or sports that require a helmet. So you tell me if you think I should go to space.
Yeah, there's a lot of helmets involved. This is an interesting question. It's very personal. Very personal. Juan Antonio Navarro Perez asks, thoughts on your decision to be childless?
Oh, wow.
So,
childless. I love that. It's like there's no judgment in the way that's worded.
Yeah, that was the subject heading. So coming in hot. Yeah. Okay. Do you know of research on health outcomes on women which may be affected from having or not having children? We assume this may have some impact on things like development of fibroids, cancers, menopause symptoms. Are there things that a woman who decides not to have children should be mindful of?
Interesting. Yeah.
So,
is he a doctor? He said we. I like his choice of we.
No, he said for some context. I skipped this part because it was a long email. For some context, me and my wife have also decided to remain childless.
Oh, gotcha.
We're about your age, a couple years older. They're very happy with the decision, but so this is really from his wife, like, what's going to happen to my beau day if I don't pump out a litter of children?
I think that the thing is, we tend to, when we look at research, this is me a little bullshitting around the question because I honestly, clearly, I have not kept up with the research of what specifically is the risk factor of, if you've had one child, if you've had multiple children, if you've had no children, what is your risk factor for breast cancer, cervical cancer, all these different things. But I will say that one thing we have to be really careful about is that we tend to look at research from a statistical perspective, which is there's potentially a normal distribution. It might not actually be a normal distribution. And within that sort of bell curve, where do we fall? Blah, 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 blah. And we assume that we all are mean median mode, that we're all a measure of central tendency. We're right in the middle. But the truth of the matter is we're all different. So it could be the case that for a specific woman, having children is preventive or, improves certain outcomes. And for another woman, not having children is preventive. It's like, there's just so many confounds in a question like that I'm not sure if we'll ever know the answer for a particular person without maybe super, super kind of personalized medicine. We're not there yet. I think that for me, I would never make that decision based on sort of biological propensity. It's definitely based on lifestyle. It's definitely based on psychological health. I've never had a maternal instinct to save my life. People say all the time, I'm 34, I'll be 35 this year. And they're like, you'll see. And I'm like, bitch, I'm like 35 and I've never even had an inkling. Like maybe when I'm 37, I'll wake up and be like, oh, my womb, I need to put a baby in it. But I don't think so. I just don't have an interest. It's never, ever like occurred to me. I also have some, and I hope in saying this, nobody thinks that I'm passing judgment on them because this is my own personal decision. I have some real concerns about population. I have some real concerns about resource allocation, and I don't want to contribute to the amount of human beings that are on the planet. I think there's enough, and I think there are plenty of people who don't think like me, so it's not slowing down anytime soon.
It's kind of like space.
Yeah. And, one time I actually asked my mom, if you were my age now, living in the world that we live in right now, do you think you would choose to have me? And she was like, I don't know.
Wow.
I know, right? Because it's just kind of a different era. And I don't know if I would want to bring a child into the political climate that we're living in, into the climate change devastation that we have right now. Also, I don't want to do that to my body. It freaks me out. It's like a parasite. So that's like a legit thing. I don't want another human growing inside of me. It freaks me out. Women have grappled with this from the time we were born because we're told about like making babies and blah, blah, blah. So we've always thought about it. But like men, it's biologically not a truism, that that's a potentiality for them. So I just task all of you men who are listening to this, just think about what it would be like to, like, not to raise a child, but to bear a child. Ugh.
Yeah.
And you might have the same response as me. Ugh.
Oh, I'm in your same boat where I'm in my early 40s. I was diagnosed with ovarian failure. So I found out about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, that I couldn't have children. And so that was weird because I was like, oh, yeah, I guess that was someone making the decision, or that was my biology making the decision for me.
Yeah, like even if you weren't sure what you wanted, now all of a sudden your decision-making capability is taken away from you.
Yeah, it's like, do you want this donut? You're like, I don't know. And then like, oh, the donut's gone. And you're like, I guess I'm not having the donut. But yeah, I'm in the same boat, and same with population. We talked about population during our episode, but yeah, the decision to have a child versus having a career like ours where we travel a lot, like, it's really difficult to do both. It's just, I'm on planes all the time. You just got back from Morocco. The idea of being like, oh, but I'm nursing, but I'm still going to go. Oh. It's one of those things where it is legitimately very difficult to do both. And I for myself, I chose, and I think you're the same. Like, I chose my career. I chose my work. I get fulfillment from that.
And also, like, I don't want a baby. Like, I just don't want one. And I always tell myself, I grew up in an adopted family. Like, I have 2 adopted stepsisters that are twins from South Korea, and I have 3 adopted half-brothers who were in foster care. And I love my adopted siblings. And my parents decided to have the boys. My dad and his wife decided to have the boys after all of the other girls were grown and out of the house. So it's like, if I'm in my 50s and I decide that I'm settled and this is enough and I'm not feeling fulfilled and I want to extend my family, like, I have that opportunity. There are plenty of kids out there that don't have parents. And I don't have to raise a baby, which is like, ugh, that's so much work. But one other thing that I'll say about it, and this is me getting a little soapboxy, so take this as you want. But in my PhD program, it's a non-traditional program. So a lot of the people that are there are my age or older, and a lot of them have kids. And so we all have our struggles. I'm on airplanes all the time. I'm always filming. They have like kids with the flu and they have to deal with blah, blah, blah. But I do feel like in our society, we value motherhood in a way that, and granted, mothers get the short end of the stick a lot, and a lot of times they'll be in school or at work and they won't be able to nurse, and there's like a lot of sexism and a lot of kind of stigma around certain things. But at the same time, I do feel like it's like, oh, but you're a mom. And it's like, you know what? That was a choice. The same way it's a choice for me not to be a mom. I don't want to be treated differently.
Right.
I don't want people to be like, oh, well, I can just call her at midnight and she'll be able to deal with this problem. But, oh, I would never do that to so-and-so because they have kids. It's like, well, screw you. I have a personal life too.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like we should have the same respect whether we have kids or not. And that's my soapbox, and now I'm done.
No, I agree. And I agree.
It's unfair.
And I look at, the moms that I know, and there's part of me that's just like, dude, that is just too much damn work.
I know. Oh, I'm
like, it's so much respect because I'm like,
they love it though.
They love it, but I'm like, how do you do it? Like, I have so much mad respect.
I have so much mad respect for them, and I think that it's amazing. But at the same time, I also always remember that, like, we make these decisions in our life. Like, we're lucky that we live in a free society where, like, as women, we're empowered and we have the choice to have a child or not.
Yeah, for now.
Because not everybody has that. Yeah, exactly. For now. Because not everybody has that. And so that's a completely different situation. But yeah, I feel like if that's a decision that you make, a lot of things come along with making that decision. The same way that my decision not to have children comes with, any sort of sacrifices or any sort of whatever, or my decision to be a full-time student and work full-time and support myself and not be a stay-at-home, wife or something. Like, I'm not married. I have a significant other and we've been together quite a long time, but we've chosen not to get married. And that's a decision that I have made, and decisions have consequences. You know what I mean? Like, we all need to be responsible for those kinds of decisions and consequences if we ultimately are responsible for them. It is unfortunate that there are plenty of people, even in our very modern and progressive society, who unfortunately are victims of their own circumstance and they didn't really have a say.
Yeah.
And I have a different perspective of that for sure.
I will say that you're like nurturing to your friends. It's not motherly, but you are incredibly nurturing and really generous to your friends where you're like, I saw this gift for you and are you having a bad day? Come over. So it's funny because like that energy of like caretaking and nurturing kind of spreads out to a big friend group, and I think in the work you do. So I think that like you can get that kind of relationship in different ways.
I plan to see patients who are dying. You know what I mean? Like, that's a lot. That takes a lot. I don't want to also be like dealing with a kid at home. It's like I have my dog. He is needy to the extent that he's needy, but I can also legit ignore him and he won't die. Like, that's the thing. Like, kids will just die if you don't take care of them. I don't need that kind of responsibility. Yeah. All right, guys, I want to take a quick break to thank the sponsor of this week's episode, Blue Apron, the leading meal kit delivery service in the U.S. And while you guys know what they do, because I talk about them all the time, because I love them, you may not know about some of the great dishes that are coming up, like quick bucatini with broccoli and pecorino cheese, pan-fried chicken breast with sweet and tangy zucchini, Italian-style shrimp and sweet peppers over frigola sarda pasta, and Parmesan-crusted steaks with mashed potatoes and broccoli. I'm recording this at a weird hour, and I am so hungry. Just by reading these different, and I have pictures of them in front of me, these like delicious looking dishes. All right, so just in case if you don't know how it works, let me remind you, you go online, you choose your meal plan. They're super flexible. They offer 12 new recipes a week. You can pick 2, 3, or 4 recipes based on what fits your schedule. And once you select them, they get delivered to you on the date you prefer. You get this big, amazing box of food with all of the ingredients that you need, not just the core ingredients, but all of the spices and herbs and sauces and things. They're all perfectly portioned, so there's no food waste whatsoever. And these are incredible chef design recipes, things you would never think of to cook at home, with a beautiful full color kind of recipe card. So it's got step-by-step instructions. You really can't go wrong. I'm a terrible cook, and I make amazing Blue Apron food. So guys, I don't know what you're waiting for. I really want you to try it out if you haven't yet. They're treating you. Blue Apron's treating you to $30 off your first order if you visit blueapron.com/nerdy. So again, check out this week's menu. Get $30 off at blueapron.com/nerdy. All right, guys, let's get back to the show.
Annika Merkelbach wants to know, are you an optimist, realist, or pessimist?
I think I'm a realist. I'm a little pessimistic, though, I'm going to be honest. I don't think I'm a cynic, though. I don't go all the way into cynicism. I try to avoid that. I'm not an optimist, though. And in essence, I actually rail against that. Like, I read this amazing book that I think informs a lot of my decision-making called Bright-Sided by Barbara Ehrenreich, and I highly recommend it to everybody. It's called Bright-Sided, I think, How the Power Positive Thinking Movement is Destroying America. Something like that is the subtitle. And I've done a lot of research into sort of the benefits of maintaining a skeptical, realistic stance. And I think that optimism, especially in psychology, there's a lot of woo around optimism. Like, it's supposed to be so powerful that it can like heal things. And I think that's bullshit. Like, you can't will yourself out of depression. Right. Just by being optimistic. And you're not going to influence your cancer diagnosis if you're optimistic. If you are the type of person who maintenance of optimism is natural for you and comfortable for you, sure, it can be a benefit. I'm not saying people shouldn't think positively, but I don't think that we should put the onus on thinking positively to like solve the world's problems, because it makes us lazy. Yeah. And it also makes it so that when we can't fulfill on that promise, we feel like massive failures. And so I think it's really important that the way that we react and the way that we experience the world and our emotional state and our affect is what it is. Ultimately, we can't control it. And so I think understanding ourselves, whether we're negative or positive or whatever, I also think that it's a bullshit thing to be like, he's an optimist and he's a pessimist. Like, no, you just are. And I think learning who you are and being comfortable with feeling states that are reactive and natural is a really important aspect of growth. And not trying to force yourself into a different emotional state is important.
And do you think it varies day to day, hour to hour?
It varies day to day, hour to hour. For sure, though, people have different personality traits. For sure. But there's a big difference between like intellectual skepticism, which I really am a proponent of, and trying to trump your emotions by intellectualizing things. And I think that that can be very dangerous. I think it's super important to be comfortable in your own affective state. I think it's also really important to learn how to live with ambivalence. You know, because a lot of, I think, the problems and the kind of psychic conflict, and I don't mean psychic like reading people's minds, I mean psychic like psychological conflict that people experience comes from being of two minds about things. Simultaneously loving somebody and feeling really resentful towards them, or simultaneously being excited about doing something and being deathly afraid of it. Like, this is a normal existential human experience. And I think a big part of therapy for me over the years, and part of what I'm learning a lot about actually doing therapy, is about sitting with ambivalence and realizing like it's okay to feel two things at once that are in complete conflict. It doesn't mean I'm crazy.
Yeah. I think that the notion, especially maybe in America, where maybe it's a kind of a remnant of religion, of a hell, heaven, hell, sin-atone kind of a thing, is trying to categorize things as good or bad a lot so that you can easily deal with them. And
yeah, making them really binary. And also like this idea of evil.
Yeah.
Like, oh, well, and this was a big problem, I think, at the early, anybody who watched Mindhunter on Netflix, I think it was really informative of this problem of early criminal justice psychology, just that like some people are just evil and we don't need to explain it and we don't need to understand the impetus for it, because it's really scary to think that if certain things happen to you in your life, you could become homeless or you could commit murder or you could, nobody wants to think about the fact that they have that capability within them. They just want to think, oh, but those people are evil or those people are less than, or, you know, this very tribalistic view that somehow that will never happen to us. But we're all one or two bad decisions away from losing everything. And I think we have to remember that in our lives. It actually maintains a sense of responsibility and a sense of, I think, gratitude that a lot of sort of privileged people forget. And they think, oh, I just am bound to be this way. It's my constitution. And it's like, honey child. I've talked to many, many people who are homeless who were in a position that was not different than mine. You know what I mean? I remember doing an interview with this amazing guy for SoCal Connect. You can look it up. I think it's called The New Face of Homelessness. Like, look it up on YouTube or something. And he was, you know, an engineer at Lockheed.
Oh, God.
He had a great job, great family. And he like went through a divorce, which happens to a lot of people, had some substance abuse problems, lost his job. And now he lives in a river. Like, it's, you know, and he's amazing. He actually volunteers at the homeless shelter and he's homeless. Like, he's this incredible, insightful, really brilliant guy, but he knows like he has these struggles. And it's just, you know, you see it with the opioid crisis a lot. People who were like high functioning, really, you know, go-getter, and then they break their back or they have some terrible surgery and they start taking opiates and then they get hooked and they can't get off of them. And then they realize that heroin is a little bit cheaper and it's easier to get their hands on, and then their lives are destroyed. So just real people. We're all just people.
So the world is not binary.
Yes, it's all very gray. And I love that. I love it.
I feel like that's such an important realization to make, or something to really, really sit with, is that things are gray.
Yeah. And it's, unfortunately, I don't think enough people, because again, societally, we try to make things very simple when they're just not. Yeah.
James Nicewinder wants to know, what is your favorite science museum you've ever been to and what made it special?
Oh my gosh, my favorite science museum. I've been to so many museums. It's funny because I don't go to quote unquote science museums as often as I go to natural history museums. There is sort of a distinction in the United States or in certain areas, like natural history might have more antiquity and science might be more interactive and less sort of artifacty, I guess. I mostly spend time at natural history museums. I do love bones. I think the Smithsonian Institution complex is probably my favorite in the United States. Anytime I go to DC, I carve out time to at least spend a little bit of time in natural history and a little bit of time in air and space, but I like natural history and better. I love the Hall of Bones. I love the Human Origins Hall. They do this great thing at the Human Origins Hall in the Smithsonian where they not only have replicas of like Lucy, like Australopithecus, and different like Homo erectus and Homo whatever, Florenzian, whatever, the Hobbit, yeah. But they do this cool thing where they had artists create busts of them and they mount them at the appropriate height.
Whoa.
And so you can look into their eyes and like it really makes them much more human. And really looking into the eyes of our ancestors is incredible to me. I do love our local museum, the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County. I've done a lot of work with them. I know you actually volunteer with them, which is awesome. I think that's so cool.
Thanks, dude.
Do you still do it?
Not as much because I've been traveling a lot.
I was like, I wish I had the time.
I know. I did it every Wednesday for a while. And then, yeah, it was just like my little, I would just go because I couldn't get fired from it.
Yeah.
There were no stakes. I just wanted to be around people I never would get to meet otherwise. It was very, very, I always say that if anyone's going through a tough part of their life, they should just go volunteer a couple hours a week somewhere if you can, an hour a week or
And it doesn't have to be like when people think, oh, I want to volunteer. It doesn't have to be at like the women's shelter. Like you can do that, and that's great.
You can volunteer at so many places.
Yeah, if you're like, I don't think I can do that. I'm not in a good headspace. It's like go volunteer at a museum.
Yeah, go volunteer somewhere you would want to be. Like choose something selfish if you. Yeah. Choose something selfish that you just want to go do. Go volunteer with puppies.
Selfish, right? You're
I love museums.
Bugs. I love all these things.
Just want to be here. But I think even if you're, like helping groom puppies or something, just go, just to get out of your routine. You'll end up having conversations with people you wouldn't have had otherwise. So I'm always like I always say, do that if anyone's having a bummer time.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, because I've become so close to the people and because I know every time there's a new exhibit coming through. And I also... sometimes I get hired quite a bit to moderate panels and things like that at the museum. Like I think we have one coming up soon for the tattoo exhibit that they have there, which is really cool. I get to interview women tattoo artists.
Oh, cool.
About kind of this really male-dominated field. Sorry, I have like dog hair on my nose. It's making me crazy. No killer. I also did spend some time in Paris, and when I was in Paris, I went to this really, I don't even know what the museum is called, so I apologize, but it was like an anatomy museum where it was just all bones, just this big museum of bones, and I loved it because everything was a little sketchy and a little old and a little like, that's a janky display, and I can't read anything because it's all in French, but that was really fun, and it reminded me a bit of, if you've never been to the Mutter Museum.
I've never been, but everyone tells me I need to go.
It's so good. So it's in Philadelphia. It's like the College of Physicians or something like that, I think they call it, and it's this amazing, it's tiny. It's, the curation has improved over the years, but previously there were like unmarked display, like you didn't even know what you were looking at. Something like glass was broken, like, but now it's the curation has improved, and it's biological oddities. So there's like a megacolon, there's a wall of syphilitic skulls. There's like conjoined twins. It's fascinating to learn about what can go wrong with just a simple little genetic quirk or environmental quirk.
Man, I went down a megacolon YouTube hole, or I guess I went up one not too long ago, like an Instagram. If you look up toxic megacolon, damn, those things are big. They're like anacondas in your stomach.
Oh, this thing, like, because it's mounted in this big display case, you're literally like, how is that in a person? And then there is the historical kind of black and white photograph of the person's like enormous belly holding on to this mega. And also, a lot of times, unfortunately, it is linked to either poverty or mental illness, but there is that kind of like, how did it get so bad? Like, how did they not realize? It's just like, woo, that's fascinating.
But I just did an episode on museology, and I asked people what their favorite museums were, and so many people told me the Mutter Museum, and I'd never heard of it. I'd never been.
Way.
Yeah, so I gotta go.
Let's go together.
Yeah, let's go to Philadelphia.
Philly. Yeah, Philly's one of my favorite cities.
Let's get some cheesesteaks.
Oh yeah, it's so funny. I never eat cheesesteak when I'm there.
I've never had a cheesesteak in my life.
It's not that good.
Okay.
Whoopie pie, though. They're really into whoopie pie in Philadelphia because there's like a big Amish influence there. We'll go to Reading Terminal. Oh my gosh. So I lived in New York while I was working on my PhD 10 years ago for 1 year. But one of my best friends, Farshana Gurusamy, who's actually in town right now and who I've had on the podcast before, she was getting her medical degree in Philadelphia. And we would trade off weekends. And then we both realized that we hated New York but loved Philly. So she stopped coming to New York and I just went to Philly every weekend. I took the Chinatown bus. It was $10 round trip. I almost died every time. And it was a time of my life that I'd never give back.
Philadelphia is so stoked right now.
I know. Brotherly love, sisterly love too.
Lonnie H wants to know, what is the most ridiculous science-related question you've been asked and then had to explain why it was so ridiculous? And she hashtagged this confusingly worded question.
Confusingly worded, I don't know. I would have to do a little research to be able to answer that off the top of my head. But
I think she's saying her question was confusing.
Oh, okay. Because I'm like, I don't know if it's like somebody's asked a question and we're like, what are you asking me? But it's more that it's like the sexist questions.
Oh, yeah.
They make me crazy. When people literally have this preconceived notion that like we are in a post-racial, post-sexist country. And so when like they don't understand why we need measures and metrics to right the wrongs of a disenfranchised past. Like right now I'm heavily studying psychometrics in school, and I'm focusing a lot on test development and how basic test items are, like tests are mostly written by white people. Not so much white men anymore, but definitely by white people. And so a lot of the norms are not reflective of reality because they don't use stratified norm samples. But the problem isn't just that the tables that we look up like standard scores against are mostly white people. It's also that the items themselves were written for white people. So here's a really good example that they talked about in my psychometrics class. There was a test item on the SAT, and they found it using this really cool thing, item response theory, but whatever, that's a little beyond the scope. But they found it and were able to flag it and get rid of it. But they were like, okay, so there's this test item, and it was like, strawberries are to red as blank are to blank. And the correct answer, quote unquote, was lemons are to yellow. But they found that by and large, Latino test takers were missing the item, and they were picking the answer that said grasses to green. And they're like, yeah, but that's not a fruit. It's not the same. But then they realized that in many Latino communities, especially in South America and Central America, lemons are picked while they're still green. Oh. And so lemons aren't yellow culturally.
Yeah.
And these are the kinds of things that if white people write the questions and they never think about it, unless they go after the fact and do this really important analysis, they won't realize. We also see this a lot with African American test takers on personality or psychopathology screens, like the MMPI, which is a really big one. There will be tests for paranoia, these scales looking for psychopathology. It's looking for like schizophrenia.
Yeah.
And there will be questions that say things like, the police are out to get me.
Oh my God.
And it's like, of course, that's actually tapping into historical oppression.
Yeah,
it's not tapping in to psychopathology.
Yeah.
And so it's super important that culturally we understand that historical disenfranchisement is not over. First of all, this big study just came out in the New York Times that Black men over the course of their life have a significant, and we know this already, but the fact that they did a massive multi-year study, that Black men, by and large, have a significant difference in monetary outcomes than white men, regardless of their status when they start.
Yeah, I saw
Black men
that.
who start out rich will become poorer over the course of their lives. We also know that 1/10 of Black men are going to end up in prison.
God.
It might even be more now. Like, there's a huge risk if you're just a Black boy in America that you're going to go to prison.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not because there's a big risk that you're going to be a criminal. It's because you're going to be disproportionately targeted.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think these kinds of things are important to understand. And I think when people ask these naive, but also loaded questions about like, why do we need to target women in this? Or why do we need to target African Americans in this? And it's like, are you completely ignorant of history? I explain it sometimes, like when I'm fighting with my boyfriend, and people say like, oh, one of my friends, oh, I got in a fight with my boyfriend, blah, blah, blah. And then he was like, just totally normal to me the next day. And he expected that everything was better, but it wasn't better. I'm like, yeah, because he has to be equally as nice on the scale as he was mean the day before in order to get back to neutral state. You can't go back to neutral because now you're still splitting the difference and you're still in the half negative part. You have to like shoot all the way up in order to neutralize again. Like, how do we not understand this? It's like, it just goes back to my thinking of action potential. So the way that like neurons fire. And so I see a graphical representation in my mind. And I think a lot of the same way about righting the wrongs of history. We won't right the wrongs. We can't undo history, but we have to make sure that we do things that go above and beyond in order to get eventually to a place where there's equity. Mm-hmm. Because just pretending that equity exists or even operating as if none of that happened and even if we did a good job to have equity right now forward, there would still be disenfranchisement because we have to level the playing field. It's not fucking level.
Yeah.
By any stretch of the imagination. So there you go. Sorry. Rant over.
Do you want to be forewarned if an interview is going to ask you about, like, what's it like being a woman in science? Or do you mind that question? Or are you like, oh, there's the dick question?
I don't mind it personally because I think it gives me a chance to educate about why. And you can sometimes tell the difference between a dick question and a naive question. And I do think that context matters. I definitely have friends, feminism is not monolithic. And I definitely have friends in sort of a feminist movement, especially in science, who get really offended by certain things and feel like we should be past a naive question. Like, I don't know. I just feel like sometimes if a fan is like, you're hot and smart. And I'm like, oh my God. Sometimes I can tell it's coming from a shit place. And sometimes I legit think they think they're giving me a compliment.
Oh, yeah. No, I think they do.
And so then that's when you can use it as a learning experience.
What do you say to that?
Like, I'll say, like, you may not realize it, but it's actually really offensive because there's an assumption made there that intelligent women are generally ugly or that really smart women are somehow like passive and don't feel the need to quote unquote be smart to get through life. Like, it's just like these implicit assumptions. And then if they're still trolling me, then I'm like, well, fuck you. And so it's the same thing if somebody interviews me about like, what's it like to be a woman in science? I'll be like, okay, first of all, like, what do you actually want to know? Like, it's not even a good question. I would never ask somebody that in an interview.
It's kind of like what's it like is like, what, like in what way? Yeah.
Like, what's it like to have blue eyes, Alie?
Like access to tampons? Are we talking about like, people looking at my boobs? Like, what are we talking about here? Like institutionalized misogyny? What are we talking about?
Exactly. So it's like not even a good interview question, first of all. But I don't know. I don't get offended unless I'm being trolled or unless somebody is resistant to empathy. But if somebody is just not being empathic because they literally have never been in that position where they need to be, like I'm happy to be the person to kind of help them into that. But I've chosen to be in this very public, very outspoken role. Mm-hmm. It would be much harder if I were just a hardworking lab scientist who did not have a lot of media training and I had just made some big discovery. And so a lot of journalists were knocking down my door. Right. And they're like, it must be really weird having a vagina. I'd be like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
It is kind of weird because you're like, all of a sudden, you're like, people are saying about my vagina right now. You know what I mean? Like, you're like, if someone were to come up to you, like some male in science and be like, hey, what's going on with your balls right now? You'd be like, what?
I know.
Like, I'm pipetting. Like, what do you...
But as somebody who has been in, like, other people's YouTube videos and then read comment after comment about my cleavage or comment after comment about, like, I want to come in her mouth. And you're just like, okay, wow. You just said that. You just straight up said it. You just made a rape joke. That's wow.
Like,
I'm a little bit, not that I'm impervious to it because it still affects me all the time, but I'm not surprised by it, A. And I almost expect it, which is a bummer. But I think that I'm in a different position than, an incredibly just hardworking scientist who doesn't spend time on air and doesn't put that aspect of them forward. So, like, yeah, if somebody's going to ask me about my boobs, it's like, here we go.
Yeah. You've fashioned an emotional Kevlar vest.
Yeah.
Okay. Doesn't mean
Kevlar bra, so
if you will. This actually dovetails well with Caitlin McColeman's question. She asked, what is your advice to practicing scientists who want to improve their outreach of their own work, but also their domain more generally? So what is your advice to practicing scientists?
Mm-hmm. I think that it's about communication more than anything. So one is, it's hard not to be afraid of journalists because I know that journalists will sometimes misrepresent what you do. But at the same time, unless you're willing to talk to them and have conversations with them, there is no representation of what you do. So I do think it's about being open to the exchange of ideas between science and journalism.
Okay, so I'm going to turn the tables on you, of course, and ask, this is from Dorian, but also from you. I want you to think about the future and in whatever context is relevant to you. It can be personal, about Talk Nerdy, the universe. What keeps you up the most at night that worries you? And on the flip side, what are you most optimistic and excited about?
Okay, everybody says climate change.
Okay.
So I'm not going to say climate change.
Oh, what are you going to say?
But it does keep me up at night, sort of. I mean, the truth is, existentially, I don't think many of us are like, whoa, climate change as we're falling asleep at night. But we might sometimes, especially if we've just seen a documentary or we've just been reading a lot about it. I think that the thing that really does worry me about the future of kind of like humanity is tribalism. And I think that ultimately tribalism underscores climate change in a major way, because I think that part of the reason that we haven't made the mitigation and actually reversal efforts that we could have made is because of political blockage. And I think the political blockage comes from legit making decisions based on ideology that aren't even sound. They're not even economically sound decisions, but they're sort of doubling down because of this tribalistic viewpoint. And I think you can actually point to tribalism all over the globe as foundational to a lot of ills, right? It's like fundamental to war. It's fundamental to famine. It's fundamental to genocide. All of these, like, really, like the biggest atrocities that are committed really are committed in the name of like other versus us. And so, yeah, tribalism really bums me out in a major way. And I think that it's something that empathy training, and it's something that, like, I think we all have the capacity as human beings to not be that way, but I do think it's an easy, safe viewpoint that does have some evolutionary benefit to it. And so it, just like skepticism, it takes actually being mindful and making a decision to think in a social justice kind of way to go beyond that. So yes, I will say tribalism is the thing that keeps me up the most at night.
That's a great answer.
On the flip side, what am I most optimistic about and hopeful for? I think human capacity But it still bumps me out because I'm like kind of a pessimist. So I'm like, yeah, even though we can, we don't. I think that in some way, I'm not a techno-optimist by any stretch. Like, I don't think the singularity is nigh, but I do think that our ability to utilize some really innovative, it's more like creative problem solving than it is like the technology will save us all. It's more like the human ambition and the ability to problem solve. We can do amazing things. And now we're going to start making technological decisions that have a mitigation plan built in. Like before we just like launch a bunch of satellites and now it's like disgusting up there, you know, it's just like garbage everywhere. But now we know like maybe we'll have a plan for how to get it back down before we launch it. And I think we're starting to build that in. I think that we have the potential to change our relationship with plastic, for example. We have the potential to change our relationship with rare earth metals, and we can make decisions now that we know will have downstream effects. The problem is sometimes I think we allow capitalist values to stand in the way of not socialist values, but to stand in the way of communal and global thinking and downstream effects. And so, yeah, all that good stuff.
So tribalism and foresight.
Yes, as a species that has evolved in many ways, linguistically, academically, all of those things, I think that we have developed a capacity to move beyond the sort of evolutionary shackles that we have and kind of be a progressively thinking society. And we see it. I mean, we see it in America. We do. We don't think about it, but we do in certain like areas of the country. And they're like very amazing. Oh my God, my dog's being really cute right now. They're like amazing pockets of society that I think, I don't know, really impress me. But also we see it in other countries. It's easier when it's small and like everybody's ethnically similar, unfortunately, or when there's a monarchy or a non-democracy. But we do see that there are some super progressive countries where they're like, we will enact this social mechanism and we will do it and everybody will do it. And like, it's making an improvement.
Well, I want to ask you the two questions that I ask at the end of Ologies every episode.
Oh, I love that. A little cross promotion.
A little, yeah. What is one thing that really irks you about your job that is just annoying? Anything from paperwork to
I like paperwork.
You're weird.
I keep my own QuickBooks.
That's so gross.
I love it. It feels so good.
Please fix my life.
To like zero out my bank account.
Hate it.
So that's not it.
Okay, what do you hate? It can be anything irksome. Anything.
I fucking hate writing.
What?
I know. I'm about to interview a writer right now. But what I love too is that I interview writers a lot and they're like, writing is the worst. And I'm like, yes, I like to have written.
Well,
I hate writing.
Have you heard that Dorothy Parker quote that I hate writing, but I love having written?
Yeah, that's what it is. That's so what it is. I love feeling accomplished after I've submitted a paper, especially now that I'm back in school because I have to write all day.
So many.
And it's not even fun writing anymore because it's writing where you have a citation at the end of every sentence and you have to be like, oh, couldn't use that adjective. Let's figure out how to have terse language because I have to fit all this content into word limit. Like, ugh.
Yeah, but it's sharpening your mind in so many ways. You're so well spoken.
Oh, stop.
Way to go. But what things do you...
Garbage activity.
No, you're also good at typing, I noticed. I was like, oh, she's really? Yeah, you're fast at typing.
My nails done. They're like clicking and it's bothering me.
Well,
I hate having long nails.
You'll get to it tomorrow.
Yes, I will.
What thing do you love the most about what you do? What is your favorite? What thing gives you the butterflies the most?
Getting to interview super interesting people all the time and learn from them and expand, my pool of knowledge. Because I think I can read and read and read, sure. And I can, I'm in school now, so back in school, so I can take all these classes, sure. But there's just something you get out of navigating somebody's mindset and really kind of asking the right questions and probing that, like, I don't know, I get a lot out of that. It's really invigorating. I almost said infuriating, which is the wrong word. It's really invigorating for me. So that's one of them. But I think the other thing that I love the most about my job is when I get the emails from either dads, like young dads who have young girls, or girls who are like just in college, when people are like, I listen to your podcast and it influenced me to study science in school, but that's the kind of stuff that you're like, oh yeah, that's why I do it. Yeah. Because there are days when you're like, what am I doing with my life? This is horrible and I don't want to get out of bed. But then you get emails like that and you're like, oh, worthwhile.
There's a 17-year-old with a lip ring out there and a lab coat, and you're like,
and I'm like, oh, I love you. Yeah,
I did
so that's the stuff that I love. I mean, it's like a very small role. I definitely did not do that, but just to like have that opportunity to show that there's like allies, because I think mainstream we talked about this earlier in the show. With mainstream entertainment, it just doesn't exist really. Yeah. With counterculture entertainment, you see it in the podcasting world, in the YouTube world, and there are plenty of really amazing role models. But even depending on the degree program you're in, if you're working on an engineering degree, like good luck having a female mentor. Like we're getting there, but I'm lucky in psychology and neuroscience. Like I'm on the shoulders of giants. Like these were women. There are a lot of amazing women who came before me, but there's still women in certain fields like cosmology where they're like, there's not a woman to be seen in my department. And it sucks. It's a huge bummer. And so I think just being able to see other people doing what you do and then getting that sort of feedback, that's what makes it worthwhile.
That's what warrants pants some days.
Some days I'm willing to put on pants for that reason.
Thank you for being my guest on Talk Nerdy.
Oh my gosh, episode 200. Can you believe it? Alie, thank you for doing this.
Oh, I love it. Come on.
So much more interesting than me interviewing myself, which is what I did last time. And everybody listening, thank you for coming back week after week. I'm really looking forward to the next time we all get together to talk nerdy.